this session with the WELS Systems Foundation. This session is being recorded. We're bringing WELS Systems Foundation to you, reimagining CQI, providing an equitable approach for your data stories. Today, thank you so much for attending our sponsorship session. The sponsors mean a lot to the Smart Start Conference. Thank you so much for being a part of this with us. For today's session, I'm going to turn it over to the members of WELS Systems Foundation and let them introduce themselves. But I do want to remind everyone, if you would please cut your mics off during this time so that everyone can hear, unless you're interacting. So someone has their mic on. We're hearing some feedback. But also keep an eye on the chat for today's surveys, for today's sessions, and we will also include information in reference to yesterday's session. We would love to have your feedback because that helps us with the next Smart Start Conference. Hopefully we'll be able to meet again in person soon. But again, thank you for attending. And now I will turn over the session to Muriel Wong of WELS Systems Foundation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to be able to, can you go to the next slide, Mike? Be able to thank all of you for all the work that you've done, especially through the pandemic. It's been a very, very hard time for us, especially for those in early learning. And we so appreciate being a classroom teacher myself, and as far as a director, of being able to work with families, but I have the courage to be able to continue to do so. And then I also want to thank my own WELS family for the support they have given me, but also to our own little community as far as our village of being a software company. I want to be able to thank Allison Gonzalez, who's with us today. She's our field ambassador. Also, Emily Snowden, who is our educator support. There's Haiti Valdez, who is our chief, officer. Customer officer. Then I also want to be able to thank the man of the hour, Mike Cullen, is our chief of support. He provides us with support to all of the people using WELS, and also Abel Farrow, who made this beautiful, beautiful presentation of the vision that we're going to share with you today. And last but not least, our fearless leader, Carlos Valdez, who is the president of the WELS System Foundation and chief thank you officer, as he likes to call himself. Okay, next slide. So one of the things we want to, or three things we wanted you to do today. We want to be able to, number one, for us to be able to use the educator's voice as the first one that is used to determine the context of how we support the children and families in the development of their learning in their classrooms and programs. We also want to be able to think about using DAP as a focus, because this is really what advances equity for all children and families and educators in early learning programs. And then we want to be able to also think about the data that comes from educators, because this is what really we need to guide and inform and determine how best we support young children and families from an early learning mixed delivery system for a community. So we want to be able to share our ideas with you, but also to be able to hear from you as well.
So good afternoon, everybody. I just want to echo what Muriel said and thank everybody for joining us. I know it's an afternoon session and you all must be very tired, but we want to learn from you as well. So we would like you to tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your current role? So Emily's going to drop a link to a Mentimeter. It looks like this when you log in through the link that's in the chat, and just tell us what is your current role. We'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then we'll look at the aggregate results. So when you log in to follow the link for the Mentimeter, it should look like this, and just submit, in 1 or 2 words, whether you're an educator, a systems leader, an assessor, a parent,
Wow.
Wow. So this is a beautiful representation of all the various roles that are here, and we're so excited to see. I'm going to call out some of the ones that really pop out: program coordinators, directors, technical assistants, administrators, coaches, program managers. We have people doing outreach, data educators, parent facilitators. It's amazing to see such a wide range of roles supporting our current system. So thank you again for joining us, and we are super excited to share CAPEL with you and also learn along with you. As part of today, like I said, we want to learn from you. So Emily is going to provide a link to a Padlet in the chat. And in this Padlet, we're going to ask you to reflect throughout the presentation. So we're going to leave it open and we'll revisit it, and it's going to collect information on various things. So we want to hear from you. Because there's so many roles represented, it's a great opportunity for us to hear what you think about this process, about CAPEL. Does it align with your current role? How might it support the role and the work that you do? If something's missing from the process, if something bubbles up, we also want to hear from you. So we've organized different questions, and if there's something else that maybe isn't reflected here, we ask you to put it in the chat so that we can also address it. But we want to know about the conditions, any assumptions that might be implied or that you find bubbling up, and then considerations that might need to be addressed in order to make this a more supportive process for educators and also for the system as a whole. So again, feel free to share. The Padlet is anonymous. You can click on the little comment bubble in the bottom right corner, and you can add your feedback. Again, we're going to leave it open throughout the presentation. And there's another question about how you would feel about educators being able to do this work from an application on a phone or on an iPad, if that is something that's doable. So again, if there's something else that bubbles up and it's not reflected in the CAPEL, we encourage you to leave it in the chat for us too. So we should have time at the end to address some of those questions and other things that bubble up as well.
So one of the things that we have all learned, particularly in the last couple of years, not only with the pandemic, but also of the number of studies that have been done on early learning and early learning programs and communities that are support early learning, is that earlier ECE impacts varies by individual, classroom, family, and community characteristics. Policymakers should focus on collecting these where, how, and for whom data, and when and analyze this to modify programs that best support all children and all families and all educators. The second one, I think, is really something that we have also a shift on. Study after study have found that differences in quality ratings doesn't correspond to meaningful differences in child outcomes. And so we want to provide a provocation. Next slide. And the provocation is this: what about shifting the focus from a quality improvement to continuous appropriate practices for early learning programs? And we think that by shifting the process, particularly here, is that we focus more on a more equitable system that is reflective of mixed delivery quality investments, and really trying to be able to use the investment as a way to be able to move the quality forward for not only for young children, but for families of young children as well. Because we know that one of the things about continuous equality appropriate practices is that it keeps equity at the forefront in respecting who we are, our individual strengths, but also as far as looking at why CAPEL is important, because it really is a child and family centric. And instead of being an administrative or system centric process, it is a child and family in which it supports and focuses on what's developed appropriate in the context of children and families in the community in which they reside. It's also something that is empowering. It's empowering because it ensures that everyone who is a part of a family, part of a program, classroom, part of a program, part of a community are empowered, respected, but also supported. And probably the most important aspect of this is it's strength-based, because we build on sustaining respectful collaborative relationships, interactions among each other, among providers, directors, families, colleagues, and across systems. And we need to be able to remember, or at least to keep in mind, that it is the strengths in which we can really grow. So I want to take a moment and describe what WELS is. WELS is about, and Carlos can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's around 15 years old now. We've been around for 15 years. And WELS stands for Web-Based Early Learning System. We started out at looking at how to be able to support early learning programs through a data system as far as looking at QRS, but we have shifted our focus to be able to meet the responding to what we need to do within our field. And that early learning data really matters, but it has to matter to the people that are using it. So what you see here is an illustration of how, in essence, we've connected the dots. We have at the bottom is called Pre-K Club, and that is our provider app that's used to be able for programs to be able to set up their programs, to be able to set up their classrooms, but also to be able to maintain records such as medical records, health records, licensing information, so that a director can have everything in one place, but also it's something for educators to be able to use WELS as well, because they can also share classroom stories. But that's all connected to what we call, as far as looking at the mothership, which is WELS, in providing a provider portal, which is linked to agencies, to also link to the family portal that agencies are linked to as well, and then also the educator portal, when the educator portal is also linked as far as the agency portal. And all of it provides a central place to manage your data, but also be able to manage the kinds of supports and services that you're providing for children and families, and also your educators. So CAPEL stands for Continuous Appropriate Practices for Early Learning. And we want to be able to shift our thinking about using data that teachers, providers, and directors generate and are able to translate and use for their classrooms and for their families. And part of being able to do so is to be able to translate the data that makes sense to an educator and makes sense to a program as far as their children and families. So we've come up with looking at CQI and really reframed it in a different way to really reflect this idea of continuous appropriate practice. First, in planning, we have to set the context. And in setting the context, we need to be able to gather data that is about who we are as educators, who we are as a classroom, and also who as a program. And I'm giving you as far as what this looks like for a program, but it's also, this whole process applies to not only a program, but also as far as an agency and also as far as a system. The doing part is really what our focus is. And we determine that by the data that we look at to be able to see what is our work ahead of us. What is the best way for us to be able to support the development of our children and to be able to support our families, but also to support us as being part of a program and as an educator. And so being able to not only to focus on our work, but also document our progress all the time. The next thing as far as the process is reflection. And I know this is probably one of the most challenging things that we need that we do now, but we need very, very seriously to provide time for us to be able to think as a program, to think as an educator, and to think as a classroom about what's working for children, what's working for families, but what most importantly, what's working for us. Then we have to be able to take what we've thought about as far as the practices and the work that we've done thus far and say, what is it that we really want to be able to sustain? What is it we really want to be able to do and continue to do on a daily basis? And we have to be able to do that in the context of what works best for our children and families in our programs. We also have to be able to celebrate our efforts and be able to make sure that we celebrate ourselves as a program, but also to celebrate those who care and educate our children. And then we have to think about what is it we need to do next. You know, I've been in this field for almost years, which is hard for me to actually say, but I can say this, that one of the things that's most important thing as a teacher of young children is to be able to know your children and how they develop. And so using development appropriate practices as our focus or as our framework, I think is a way for educators to have a voice about their classroom, about the children and the families, and also about themselves. And then when we think about development appropriate practice, we can use these six areas as far as our focus. Caring, equitable community of learners. Always the first thing that we need to do when thinking about development appropriate practices. And it really is a matter of looking at development appropriate practices as also a way as far as advancing equity, because all children, all families need to be, but also heard and seen in a community of learners classroom. We also need to think about maintaining reciprocal relationships and partnerships with families and fostering the community connection. But the most important thing, particularly as far as what I think for educators, is being able to maintain those relationships, because it is the partnership between the first teacher of a child, which is their parents, and the teacher in an early learning program, and that connection that fosters not only the development of that child, but the joy that child experiences in their early years. Then, which is also very something that can be overwhelming at times, is documenting and assessing children's development and learning. This is something that has to be done, but we need to be able to provide teachers time to do this, and being able to have time to do it, but also understanding what they're observing as far as interpreting it to teaching and enhancing children's learning and development. And then being able to plan and implement an engaging curriculum to achieve meaningful goals for those children in that classroom. Not necessarily what is out there as far what should be done, but what these children need and learn as far as it's going to be benefit their development is what I mean by meaningful. And the last is demonstrating professionalism as an early childhood educator. You know, the pandemic has been a silver lining in this is Muriel talking, in a sense of being able to really highlight the really fragile balance that we have in this world when, as far as we think about young children. And even though it's been very hard and very difficult for all of us, I think that the fact that we are now really realizing the importance, but also the primary focus we need to have in caring and educating our young children is really something that I think has come out of this, at least it has for me. Next slide. So this is how we're looking at seeing how this is starting. And this is what we need to get your feedback on, especially as we think about looking at this approach. So in thinking about getting started, one of the things we, of course, is having a community of practice around CAPEL and about this approach, because shifting from having coaches and mentors to be able to sort of guide the process and not having as far as teachers involved in the process is a shift. And part of that shift is being able to provide them with the mixed delivery of professional development and quality investments that allow them to be able to go through this process with the kinds of supports that they need to be able to make it happen. The second thing about getting started is the data. And the data, and we have two things as data that we need to look at. First, we need to be able to give educators an opportunity to be able to really look at themselves as an educator, but to be able to see themselves as far as what about working with young children that they want to be able to build their strengths on. The other, as far as data, is to be able to give them opportunity to reflect on their own program and their own class. And so these two things really give a sense of a perspective for the educator, but also as a program as far as who they are and how they need to think of what they need about as moving forward. And so part of what we thought about, particularly looking at this, is thinking about a community of practice around DAP, and how this is different in how we're approaching this is that this is an opportunity for teachers to come together to really share their information about their children and their classroom and their families. And from this, to be able to have an opportunity to be able to talk about how children are developing as far as their social development skills, what how are their emotional skills, but also looking at their physical development and of course their cognitive development, and have opportunities in sessions with each other to be able to talk about what is really critically important for us to be able to focus on as far as their learning, and then to be able to use that information to be able to plan for their classrooms, but also to be able to plan for their families, and then to be able to continue what's working as far as what's working best for their children and families in that classroom, with again the support of a mixed delivery of services and supports as far as funding, but also as far as professional development.
So this is a sneak peek at some of the context for an educator and for a program. So when we're talking about CAPEL and the framework and the resources and the toolkit, this is kind of part of like that planning phase, that getting started, getting to know, looking at myself as an individual, as an educator, me, myself, and I is what we're kind of calling it. And it's really just a survey so that the educator has that time to reflect and go inward, and then also looking at the program as a whole. So how does the program context support that educator, and how does the educator, or the various educators within that program, tie in? So these are initial surveys that could be conducted as part of that planning phase of really getting to know me, myself, and I as the educator, and then where I fall within the context of the program. And again, making that educator voice, that first voice, and giving, you know, equity to that voice, because who knows better the children in the classroom than the educator themselves. And along the same lines, we've developed some staff and family context surveys. So the data from these surveys helps inform the decisions that are made within the program. So again, looking at the staff, these are opportunities for the parents and the families to give their feedback about what's happening in the program. We heard yesterday Dominique speak about the rights of the families and the communities as part of that collective we. So we really feel like this is giving that equitable voice to the families and asking them about their needs as well. And, you know, Dominique said it so eloquently yesterday. She said, families might not know how to get the services or what they need, but who else knows better than anyone what their children need? And it's really, truly the family. So we feel very strongly that this is an important part of that planning phase and that process are these surveys, not just for the educator and the program, but also the staff and families as well.
Okay, I know this is can be a little overwhelming, but I want you to sort of stick with me to go through the process. So one of the things about looking at data, and I am not a data person, Carlos can tell you that, and Haiti as well as Mike, but I can tell you this, that it's a matter of translation of data from one person to the next. And what I say this data means and what you say this data means can be totally different. But what's important here is that we want to be able to use the data from the lens or the voice of the teacher first, and then to be able to do the translation of that data or the component to as far as how it applies to early learning services and programs. So what you see in program is from the classroom is child, teacher, and family interactions. That's what we're going to focus on. And this is going to be our focus, teaching to enhance each child's development by maintaining reciprocal family-teacher relationships. And by doing so, then we are able to then align this with the different early learning programs that we're also engaged in. From the Child Development Fund, we're looking at ensure equal access to child care for low-income children. Parents is informed that the child certificate allows the option to choose from a variety of child care categories. Or it could be from pre-K, family supported materials and available in multiple languages. Or it could be from Head Start, parent activities to promote child learning and development. The goal is to be able to make it so that the teacher doesn't have to go through all the different standards and the requirements from all the different funding sources that our program has. They need to focus on their children and where their children are, so that you're able to use that as a way to be able to gauge what is appropriate for those children in that classroom. And so what we're saying is investment support, which is on the left-hand side, is that these are all the different things that can be provided, but it does not provided by all the different supports that are listed there. But all these together are providing the support so that an educator is able to support and maintain reciprocal relationships with their families and with the teachers. And WELS is the data source, is able to link all that together in as far as being able to keep it with that focus, but also meet requirements of the different funding streams that they're serving. So this is something that, you know, apps are the big thing now. I'm not an app person. I'm old, so I still like to have my PC. So one of the things about the app, the one you see, it says classroom name and progress status. This is so that a teacher is able to look at her app and she's able to see where she is in the process as far as looking at continuous appropriate practices. The black line, vertical line, is really what a client would be able to set up as what they would determine what is progress. This is set at 40%. You could do it at 60% or 80%, but this would give them a gauge of where they are in the phases of their continuous work, appropriate work, also where they are as far as meeting their goal. On the right one, as far as classroom name, the focus, these are the 6 different components that we refer to as what teachers would focus on educators would focus on. The number in the middle, like community learners, is for a community of learners in the classroom. She has 6 goals for that one component. When she clicks on the 6 goals, the number 6, it pops open and you're able to see all the 6 tasks that she has created for community of learners, and she's also able to work off her phone to be able to either write or check off what she's done, or be able to say it's completed or what progress she's been able to make. Next slide. So
these are some of the ways the WELS Early Child Team can help support you. We're able to help you link, whether it's developmentally appropriate practices to the standards, whether it's linking multiple. We know that there's, you know, multiple measures and multiple tools as part of this mixed delivery and multiple sources of funding and supports. So we want to help you streamline that process. A lot of times there's overlap, and you know, it's just putting them into context and really streamlining and crosswalking the content. So what our team can help you with that. We also can help you develop those self-assessments that we gave you a sneak peek into, those surveys for your educators, for your program, for your family, for your agency and your systems. And how do we plan to do all of this? Through COPs. We found communities of practice to be a very valuable learning tool. And so these are some of the supports and part of the WELS solution that we would love to help you with.
And I'd like to add something. Can you go back? I'm sorry. But I want to add something as far as looking at self-assessments. You know, part of the thing that I think is important about our field is that being able to have the time to be able to out who you are, what you do, and your relationship in the context of the children and families in your program is really essential to us being successful in supporting educators. And we really have not done a lot of that. So being able to do that, I think, is an eye-opener for educators as well, but also as far as program directors. And the other piece of that is being able to do these assessments that allow you to be able to align it with the standards or the early learning service delivery requirements or components that you have to be able to support. So I just wanted to be able to mention that. Okay, Mike.
So what's next for CAPEL? We would love to get feedback from you today on the approach, on the process, of anything that bubbled up, of what resonates with you, of what's missing, of, you know, anything that you have to share. You feel free to leave that on the Padlet. The Padlet will remain open. You can also drop any questions in the chat. For build, we'll be adding concept of resources to the presentation to support CAPEL. So we have some ideas of how we can build in resources, articles, all kinds of neat stuff that tie in and link to standards, to various assessments tools. Because like I said earlier, it's not any one measure. It's a combination now, and really is a focus on this mixed delivery and giving everybody what they need. We're working on this CAPEL translation table, as we're calling it, to be linked with the resources for late fall. And we hope to be able to launch CAPEL in winter of 2023. So please leave us, your feedback on that Padlet, and feel free to drop any questions in the chat too.
And I'm more of a people person than a computer person. So I would love to have been able to sit in a room to be able to have this discussion. But we want to leave you with two thoughts. And one is honoring the culture of childhood. And this is a quote from Peter Gray. Children are biologically designed to pay attention to other children in their lives, try to fit in with them, to be able to do what they do, to know what they know. Through most of human history, that's how children became educated. And still largely how children become educated today, despite our misguided attempts to stop it and turn the education job over to. This really hit me like a brick when I read this. And I think that is something that we really need to be able to at least realize that our role in life, and this is Muriel talking again, is to honor young children, but honor the culture of their ability to grow up and have a childhood that they deserve to have. And I want you to remember, each of us must come to care about everyone else's children. We must recognize that the welfare of our children and our grandchildren is intimately linked to the welfare of all other people's children. After all, when one of our children needs life-saving surgery, someone else's child will perform it. And this was said by Lillian Katz, who was my teacher for many, many years. And I have never forgotten this. This has been my North Star for a very long time. So these are the two references, the policy group. If you really, something interesting that was done with Duplo Box is that the policy equity group has done a YouTube video on QRS, building the case for knocking it down. I would change this to rebuilding QRS, but I think that the simplicity of how they've explained this is something definitely worth your time. The second is, of course, is Peter Gray's book, but Free Range Kids, as far as looking at what a blog post we have almost destroyed childhood. And of course, for anybody who's in early childhood, this is our Bible, then from the National Association for the Education of Young Children, Developing Appropriate Practice, 4th edition. And I do want to reiterate that if you are truly developing appropriate, that you're truly advancing equity. And I do believe that's a reciprocal kind of relationship that you have in supporting all children.
So again, we encourage you to share your thoughts about CAPEL. We do have a few extra minutes if there's any questions, if anything bubbled up, or if you feel more comfortable leaving that feedback anonymously on the Padlet, please do so. We really value your time. We appreciate learning from you. We appreciate any and all feedback. In fact, we welcome it because this is something we're building and developing. We've also shared a link to our website where if you want to request more information, you can drop us a message, put in the comment box that, I want to learn more about CAPEL. I heard the presentation, and that's a great way to get in touch with us. But again, we can't thank you enough for your time, your effort, and all you do for the children, families, and community that you serve. And I hear that we are going to raffle off a very special prize. Let's see if there's any questions first that bubbled up in the chat. Emily, were there any questions before we proceed
Not
with
yet.
the?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, so the lucky winner of the iPad prize is Stephanie Fields. Stephanie, are you here?
We probably need
some, to have her contact information. Email to
Yes.
us.
And I will get that for you. Let's see if Stephanie is still with us.
And Stephanie, you're still with us. So if you can, we should have your email, but if you can email conference@smartstart.org, we'll make sure we can get your contact information.
Thank you so much for that wonderful prize. I know Stephanie is very excited. I'm excited for her. Thank you all so much from WELS Systems Foundations. We are so glad to have you be a part of the Smart Start Conference. Do you have any last words for us? We're going to put all of our survey information in the chat box. We'll also have documents posted to our website. And we will also record this session, and that will also, we have recorded this session, and that will also be posted to our website. So if you have any last words for us, that will be great. Thank you again so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for what you do for your children and families and for our children and families. And really, this is something that is really, we really want to be able to hear from you, because you're those in the field that are doing this work, and you're the ones that are going to make the difference. So please give us your feedback and let us know your thoughts. And thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It was great to see you all. Sort of.
Bye-bye. And today's code for this session is data. Data.
We love that code.
Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne.
My boss worked that out perfectly for this session. So everyone should get that. Thank you again so much. We had a great turnout for your session. And if I may do anything for you, please let me know. And again, thanks for the iPad. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy. Take care. It was good to see you all.
Okay, good to see you too, Yvonne.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.